Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with my Halloween loving, finishing, candy pirating Teos Abadia. Hey Teos, how you doing?
Hey, Shawn. I am filled with candy because my wife was. Well, usually we make popcorn balls. They're delicious. We didn't have the time. So we just bought Reese's Pieces peanut butter cups because when only one kid showed up, that was a win. Solid win.
Uh-huh. That's that's a win. Yeah, we had our first Halloween in our new home,
Oh, yeah.
which is not in a, shall you say, residential area, but so we weren't sure. My wife is a teacher, so she buys candy for her students and brings home the rest for us to give out. So we weren't sure what we were going to get, and we got no one.
Oh, yeah.
So we do in fact have a lot of candy that I have locked away in a drawer somewhere, so you actually have to go through a process to get to it, which is, I think, important for those of us who should not be eating too much candy.
Yeah. Which is everybody, but yeah.
Yeah. However, if I did have Reese's peanut butter cups, I would not have locked them away, and I would probably be
Oh,
on a sugar high right now. And in fact, just knowing that you have them at your house, I am like looking up how much it costs to fly
yeah.
there
Come on over.
to
We
see
got
if
your
I could
Reese's
break
peanut
into your
butter
house.
cups. They're an
All
official
right.
sponsor now of the show, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. If not, they should be.
Mm.
Reese's, give us a call. Speaking of giving us a call, there are several people who have given us a call via Twitter and Patreon and YouTube and so on. And we are going to take their missives right now. We are going to start with James W., who wrote into us via our Patreon Discord. James says, to what extent is this hobby to what extent is this a hobby that spans the ages? For example, is it possible for different age groups to enjoy being at the same table? Do the quote youngsters of today have different expectations of what a game night looks like? Do they expect their 10-page backstory to be shoehorned into the main plot, in effect, almost writing their character arc before they even start the module? That last bit may have been a bit of a leading question vibe to it. Uh, so the answer for me is I have played with many different people of many different ages, many different experience levels, many different personalities, many different expectations, all at the same table. This has been done through one shots. It's been done as part of organized play campaigns. It's even been done as a part of home campaigns. Right now, the ages of my players in my home group range from early 20s to close to 60. And I don't think I've ever run into a real stereotype behavior along the lines of ages. In fact, this 10-page backstory thing, which James seems to attribute to younger players, I have found that those sorts of people, nothing wrong with that uh,
Hmm.
way to think about games. If you want to bring your 10-page backstory, great. They have generally been older players who have played for a long time. So right there, that breaks with the what must be James's experience or thoughts on it based on what my experience is. Uh, what do you think, Teos?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I see it kind of all over the place, and I don't know that I see, like this question could be that the answer would be something like, oh, younger kids want story rich immersion, or nothing but combat or something. But I don't really necessarily find that. I mean, there's a maturity issue when kids are, say, in middle school. A lot of people talk about how younger kids will want to murder everything, and there's certainly a little bit of that in my experience, having run a number of like middle schoolish kind of age. That they will want to try out in a fantasy world. Can I really do whatever I want and press those limits a bit? But outside of that, the play can be as rich as someone who is far older, and I don't know that I see any particular differences. Where I do see a total thing that, like, I just you can peg it, is a family of many ages that games together tends to be an absolute riot at conventions I've been to, and I've
Mhm.
seen this many times, where they will hurt one another, put each other in peril, undo what the other person is trying to do. It's absurd to sit at one of those tables and see what family members will do to each other when you might expect like a loving, well-oiled machine or something. No, it is just like, how can we mess with each other? And that's hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about the maturity level because I have run encounter seasons back with fourth
Mm,
edition
yeah.
where it was all kids like age 14 and younger. And they a couple of them did have that push the envelope, try to do anything, but they were instantly or pretty quickly talked down by
Mhm.
more quote mature people at the table, even though those people are probably 12 to 14, saying, no, that's not how we do this. And then I would run a season for older folks, and you would see that same parallel, right? You would see some people who want to go off and do wild things, and then there's other players at the table who like, do you know what this is? Do you know what D&D is? It's working together to do a goal. So that sort of parallel, the ages were different, but the roles at the
Yeah.
table and the personalities at the table sort of fell into place anyway, regardless of
Yeah.
age. So uh, I think, to answer that question, this is a hobby that spans the ages, totally spans the
Yeah.
ages. Uh, and all what it takes is communication, to let people know what's expected of the game, that particular adventure, the other people at the table, and empathy for what people like, what
Yeah.
people want, and trying to accommodate reasonable requests from people regardless of age or play style or personality, and an appreciation of everyone's time and ability to add to the game and the story.
Yeah.
That's the most
Absolutely.
important thing, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Also coming to us via Patreon Discord is Ethan, who says, if the core of the game is reducing hit points and sometimes healing hit points, why not have more mechanics that reduce hit points? We have combat, we have traps, we have environmental effects to a lesser extent. Why not make more exploration related things reduce hit points? Because exhaustion is mechanically excessive. Uh, Ethan, we can totally do that. What do we need to do that though? We need a buy-in from the players to the fact that hit points might mean something different than just health and losing stuff in combat. We need a player buy-in to say that risk and death and bad things can happen outside of combat. Then, if we get that buy-in, we as designers can manipulate hit points, the loss and the gain of hit points outside of just taking them away. So it's not that we can't do it, it's that you need to find a way to do it that gets buy-in from the players and that makes sense in the ongoing narrative as well as in the mechanics of the game.
And Shawn, maybe a parallel to that is if you think about saving throws, right? Saving throws have at times been ability based. Defenses have sometimes been
Mhm,
ability based, right? Where you were attacking someone's con,
mhm,
right? Fourth edition did that. You've had saving throws be things like
mhm,
wands, staves, and rods, or death, right? Like almost categories. And so there have been a number of times when we've all fully bought into slightly different ideas of what it is that we're doing to threaten each other. And you probably could use hit points in a number of ways. When I look at this question, I think there's sort of two answers that I think of. One is, mechanically that you can do this. And yes, mechanically, the core of the game, as you've often said, Shawn, is around hit point loss. And everything kind of circles around that and feeds off of that core truth. And so we can do a lot with it mechanically, but also um, the
mhm.
core of the game is not the entirety of the game. It's just a really important
Sure.
core. And so we
Mhm,
don't do everything off of hit points because we want the game to be more than its core. Right. And so you can have both that it is true that this is super critical, important, and a useful lens to look at the game through. And there's more to the game, like role playing. And so we don't need to role play and then add, subtract hit points based on our role play, because that's not what the game's trying to do, even if the core is very important.
And if you did want to, you could do things like this. You're coming back from a dungeon and you go through a toxic bog.
Mhm.
You make a series of exploration type of checks, survival, nature, whatever, succeeding or failing. Where the game breaks down is if you take away hit points, does it really matter in the long run because you can heal them back so quickly? What you could do then is have a system where, depending on the nature of the infestation, of the poisoning, you can't get back hit points until you blank, until you get the antidote, until you rest for 2 weeks, until you do these things. While you are poisoned in this way, you have not resistance, what's the opposite? Vulnerability to all damage. Period. So that doesn't take away hit points, but it still makes the hit points the core of the game, as that it's not, well, it is meant to be. It's there because it's meant to be there. The designers keep making that an integral part of the system because that's what the system tends to be about. So do that. Okay. Now it's not you're taking away hit points, but you are making it easier to have hit points taken away or harder to get hit points back. That reinforces then the system of exploration with its hit point negotiation, with its hit point meter changing, without just, okay, you lose 10 hit points. Oh, I cast a spell, I gained 10 hit points. And literally, you could do the same thing with role play.
I was going to just say that.
Yeah.
I was imagining as you're saying that you could do something where if hit points are resilient, right? If they're not actually scar tissue and whatever always, then if it's resilience, well, then failing to convince the queen of the importance of your quest could easily mean that now you can't regain hit points easily because you're not in a resilient state, right? So you could do that same kind of approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could make, now again, it's the buy-in from the players that is the most important thing, because we have seen over time people will grumble, but in the end accept failing one check, a saving throw, could kill them, could kill their character, right? The save or die thing. People maybe don't like it, but they accept it as part of the game when it happens. Will they accept, oh, you failed a persuasion check and therefore you are killed by the town guard? They're less likely to accept that because the game separates that in some way. So in order to make it feel part of the whole rather than its own separate and less important thing, you need to find a way to integrate all of that, which you could then do with these systems that we talk about, or develop your own system that does similar things. But it would have to be play tested. It would have to be made to make sure it feels right, and all of those elements of game design. Okay, Teos, you're going to take this one first. Ready?
All right. So Magus asks 1 to 2 hour sessions versus 3 hour to 5 hour sessions versus 8+ hour sessions. Should the DM's approach differ, and how? And what this immediately made me think of is at PAX West earlier this year, we ran 30-minute demos of D&D. We ran hour-long demos of D&D. We ran 2-hour adventures, and we ran 4-hour adventures. And one thing that was really interesting to see is how exhausted the 30-minute, especially, but also 1-hour DMs were. Because if you think about it, when you're DMing in public, you've got to kind of establish the table, introduce yourselves, get everybody warmed up, get everybody to be social with each other, present the situation. And that actually takes a lot of energy when you really think about it to get that all going. Well, in a 30-minute demo, you're going to have an encounter and then end. And then you got to repeat that again and do all of that build up and that energy, right? And I think that is a lens through which I would look at this question, that the longer it is, the more that you can just sort of roll with it and work with what's there versus shorter sessions, that build up and getting the players going and focused occupies a greater percentage of the time. And the need to make, and then the second part of it, I'd say, is that in trying to establish what a session is, there's often a sort of cadence that stretches across that time period. And so if it's a shorter piece, you kind of really need to hit those points within that session. So like, you probably don't want it to be all combat. That's harder to establish in a shorter time period than in a longer one, right? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you said is true. It's about pacing and it's about story beats. Whether it's a 30-minute session or a 12-hour session, you want to have a good pace for the time and a good hit on story beats for that time. You still want interesting choices. You still want interesting and diverse encounter types, even if it's an hour-long adventure. You still want fun situations and interesting choices. But the stakes and how quickly things move forward need to be altered if you're doing it for 1 hour as opposed to 8 or 12 hours. I've run all of these different kinds of things. And like Teos said, running 8 1-hour adventures is like sprinting a marathon.
Yeah.
Whereas running 1 8-hour adventure is like running a marathon, but you're doing it at a more leisurely pace. Mm-hmm. Because in that 1 hour scenario, you boom, boom, boom. You need to get it done. You need to get all the points in. You're just go. For that 8-hour adventure, you can sit back and you might take an hour to even introduce the goal of the characters. You might take your time in running the thing because you can't sustain that pace that you would have in a 1 hour adventure over 8 hours, and the players can't.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. It's a matter of pacing, and it's a matter of hitting the right beats at the right time to keep players engaged yet focused in the right way over the time period you have.
Yeah, and I think the shorter it is, the more that the focus, you can't go long even when it's fun because you must get to an ending and you have very little time for that. And so you have to ride the waves and trim a little more. It's almost like you're on the production team and you've got to trim those scenes and keep people moving or skip things entirely. Yep. But then that's probably a big gap. If you think of the number of scenes you have in a 1 hour, 2 hour experience, you cut one, like could be a really big part of the story and hard to do. You're running 4 hours. If something's going really well, you can just go for a long time with that. And you still have enough scenes that you're going to hit on that you could skip 2 or 3 of them and it may not matter, right? And so you have a lot more latitude in the longer adventures to go with the ebb and flow and make judgment calls and so on that are at a leisurely way and a fun way. But when you're running a short demo, you can't tell me you just think about a 1 hour demo. You can't have that player that talks about their character for 5 minutes. So you've got to figure out how to cut them off without offending them. Which is a skill.
Right. Or teach them that it's against their best interest to take that time if they want to get it done. And all of this we're talking about, we're considering the 1 hour session or the 8 hour session to be a one-shot thing. Mm-hmm. If you're running a long campaign 1 hour at a time, you may have the leisure of, well, we're just going to role play for this hour because that's what the adventure calls for, and everyone knows that the next session maybe I'll combat, so we can play one off against the other. But if you're running a 1 hour session where you need to do a complete adventure, that's when we're talking about this sort of rapid fire.
And if it is
truly intense situation,
if it is an ongoing campaign, what I would say to the 1 hour DM is make it episodic, right? Make it the way a TV show would work, where you've got a big life, there's lots of things going on, but this is the mission, right? We are zooming in on that part and we're cutting off the rest, right? As you're going into the dungeon, this episode that you heard about last time, right? Like you're not going to, because if you just spend so much of the session kind of figuring things out and stuff, and that's not very fun and very engaging, it's gonna drop off in interest. So you probably want to really tailor those scenes to be the highlights of what's going on in these characters' lives.
If you never, if you only run longer games like 4-hour games or longer, go back and look at the D&D Encounters
Hmm.
adventures
Yeah.
and see how they divide things up to be run in an hour to 90 minutes to maybe 2 hours at the most, and how they try to get all the good content of an adventure into that shorter span, how they handle it. You get some really good ideas and some good tips on sort of adventure design and game flow in those situations.
And it's surprising because some of those sessions do a trek across the desert, and some of them are make it through these 2 rooms, but yet fill the hour. And yeah,
Yeah.
you're right that there is real skill that went on into that.
Mhm. All right, Teos, the last question today coming to us from Graham Ward via our Patreon. Does the buck stop with the DM or the designer? Who works for whom, so to speak? And then James W. added to that. Another question for the podcast might be, are we being too critical of 5e adventures? Are we looking at these too much from a creative creator standpoint, when in reality, we should have 2 questions. How useful is it for a new DM? How useful is this for an experienced DM? Do we need a color-coded system to indicate which type of DM this adventure is suited for? What do you think?
We could do a whole show on these layered questions. I love it.
Mhm.
Who the buck stops with. I mean, yes, the designer is serving the DM in a couple of ways. One is making it a pleasure to read this product because you may never run it,
Mhm.
or a pleasure to use as a tool so that the DM can serve the players. Does that make sense, Shawn?
Absolutely. That's the strange beauty and madness of this thing we do, is that as a creator, whether you're creating rules or adventures, you are serving one audience member, is the DM.
Mm.
But there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of DMs out there. So the buck does stop with the DM for the players, because it's the DM's job to do that for the players. Now, for the DM, the buck stops with the people designing the material they're using.
Yeah.
So, but the designer doesn't work for a DM. The
Mm.
designer works for all DMs everywhere using this content.
Great point.
So, as a designer, you can't please everyone. If you try to please everyone, you will inevitably end up pleasing no one. So, as
Yeah.
a designer, what you do is you set a goal. Yep, you set a goal and you say, all right, this is what I'm trying to do with this content. State it up front. I want this adventure to do the following thing. I want this subsystem of rules to do the following things. Now, here is how I'm going to do that. Here, then you give the material, and then you say, here's what I did. How did I do? And then the game master, the players or whoever buys your stuff or uses it, can say, okay, cool, that was the goal. I'm down with that goal. Let's see how they did. Okay, they did fine. Or nope, they fell short. Or maybe it's okay, this is the goal. I'm not interested in that goal. So I'm going to read it, but I'm not going to worry too much about using it. Then on the other side, as a creator who's trying to make a living, perhaps making stuff, you don't want to limit your market. Right. I do not want a color code system saying if it's
Yes.
purple, it means it's for new DMs who like role playing. If it's green, it's for experienced DMs who like role playing, because it's hard enough to sell your content to the market that's there.
Let's
By
see.
limiting your market even more, you're setting yourself up for failure.
And what's the color coding? The color coding is red intro, blue intermediate,
Yeah.
black, then like a
Yeah.
silver. I'm looking over at my shelf because we did that with basic, right?
Yeah.
We tried to sort of do
Yeah.
that. And it was super confusing for a lot of people, especially in the non-internet era, to figure out why an adventure was for immortals and masters. And basic and intermediates, and yeah, you don't want to limit your audience. I think also great content should work for, like as you're saying, when you're creating something, it's going to have an appeal to a certain type of demographic, and I don't really feel like the demographic should ever be new or experienced. So like if you look at the
Mhm,
starter
mhm.
sets, the best part of those starter sets for a new player should still be really fun for an experienced player to run, or experienced DM.
Correct.
Experienced DMs come back into the game all the time, right? They may have been experienced under a different edition or whatever, and or they may just simply want a great adventure to run. And the way that so many DMs have run that first starter set is indicative of that, right? Like of how many people, regardless of experience level, want to run it, right? And so I
Mhm,
don't know that new levels of experience of a DM, I don't think that's ever been a really good breakdown. I don't think it was good in the RPGA or organized play forums. I don't think it's good
mhm,
as a sales thing. Instead, I think you're going to have some things that are like, if I think of like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, that is going to
mhm,
appeal to certain people and not to others as a theme. But it still should be
mhm,
great to run for those or to whom it appeals, right?
mhm. Right. And even if it doesn't appeal to you directly, it should be mineable for
Mm-hmm.
interesting content, for interesting encounters, for interesting ideas. So I agree with Teos completely in that sense. I've written a few things now recently for new players. And while I try to take the time to explain things and to make encounters that would not be difficult to run for new players, I also want experienced DMs and players to use it and enjoy it
Yeah.
for what it is. The story that might unfold from it, uh, right? Some interesting little NPCs or choices or things like that, or even I'm not going to go that's going too
Yeah.
far down a rabbit hole I can't talk
Well,
about. But
one
yeah,
thing that
yeah.
I will say, which is like who's accountable to whom and when I write for organized play, I will often take
Mhm,
liberties in my design that I would not if I were writing for published like Dungeons and Dragons, because
mhm,
I know that a lot of DMs that run organized play are expert DMs and are writers and designers who want to pick up new tricks and think through new things. And I always felt this way when I run organized play. I love it when I see something I haven't seen before, or something that maybe
mhm,
creates like, yeah, you can do this in the game. And I will design
mhm,
things that are new and different, even though they will fail at some tables. I mean, everything fails at some number of tables, but I will accept a
mhm,
higher failure rate because I think at those tables at which it succeeds, it's going to create really good
mhm,
experiences and it's going to open some minds to possibilities, right? What if the dungeon rotates in space above you? What if the monsters are moving across the dungeon, right? Those kinds of things. And some of those things are things that other people have played with. Like Will Doyle came up with that second concept the first time that I really saw that and thought about it. And then I wanted to do my version of it, right? And so those kinds of things
yep,
sometimes are worth doing, even though you know that they will not always work because it's safer in an organized play context than publishing it out there. As I say, starter set, I wouldn't do that.
yep, yep. So there you go. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And again, you can always reach out to us via any of the social media platforms that we're on, our Discord if you're a patron, YouTube, and so on. Let us get now into our news and commentary section, starting with streaming D&D programming. That's right. Dungeons and Dragons Adventures, the streaming channel. We mentioned this when it was first announced, and now it looks like it is right around the corner. They announced a FAST, free ad supported programming channel that will launch on November 8th, which is 2 days from when we record, and it will already be started once you all are hearing this. If you get something like Amazon Freevee or Plex, there will be content for you to watch, supported as always and on those places by ads. What are the first three shows we're going to get, Teos? Encounter Party, Heroes Feast, and what was the one other one?
Faster Purple Worm Kill
Faster
Kill.
Purple Worm Kill Kill. So tell us about these.
Encounter Party is a live play run by Brian David Judkins. There's, I guess, 22 episodes that they're going to release. The Faster Purple Worm Kill Kill is the Beetle and Grimm's crew. They've run this a couple times at convention events, so you can find the videos out there now and see what they look like. Those are basically, you're going to fight some absolute horrible creature, purple worm or worse, and you're going to die. And it's just a question of how. And often they'll have special guests on there that you kind of enjoy seeing how they handle things. Heroes Feast is the cooking show using the Heroes Feast cookbook, which is probably the most successful third-party licensed product out there for D&D. So they have special guests on to cook things and do zany things. All of these have previews that you can see. And in fact, we link in our show notes to rpgbot.net. We got to meet the folks at GambleCon, really nice team. They've got an excellent article on this, linking to all the previews and all that. So check it out. And then there's older material, Shawn, like my beloved D&D cartoon from the 80s, as well as streaming stuff and all that.
Yeah, you're asking for the D&D cartoon. Well, now you will likely be able to see it. So, if any of you out there are watching these shows by the time this show drops, let us know what you think. Let us know if it's entertaining, if it scratches your D&D itch in any way, and let us know. We next get an interview with D&D designer Mackenzie DeArmas on autism, hysteria, and the Book of Many Things. Mackenzie was interviewed by Alyssa Vischer, looking at how the first autistic D&D NPC came to be. The design of this went backwards. It started with the Deck of Many Things, and there's only one named NPC associated with the deck, which is, I can't pronounce this, Uriel. And so Mackenzie took that and then designed backwards. What did you think of this interview, Teos?
It's a great interview. It's really interesting. I mean, I love the personal touch because all of us have personal touches in our work at times, right? And things can resonate with us for a lot of different reasons. And in this case, Mackenzie is autistic. Alyssa, who's interviewing, is also autistic. So they bring in a lot of depth and knowledge into this article, looking at how this is. And they talk very frankly about how the team got behind this idea of who the Medusa is and what it would mean to have a paladin champion for this Medusa. And that led to the thought of, well, if it's an autistic woman, maybe she doesn't want to actually meet her gaze to begin with. And, and sort of is shunned. She is shunned, the paladin, for not making eye contact. And when Asteria meets Uriali, they get along really well and have a lot of common for being sort of shunned by others for who they are. And it's a really nice read. This whole article is excellent look at both for a window into the design process of how you create a story and how you create a story, particularly when you hit an issue that you have to tread carefully covering, right? You don't want to, both for personal reasons and just of the world we live in, you don't want to have this be a shallow thing that you're doing or to be something that people will use against people who are autistic, right? I really like the frankness with which they look at this issue. And in the end of the story, Asteria takes on Istus, god of fate, and sort of looks back upon her life and the Medusa's life and says, no, god of fate, it isn't just preordained. I should have a say in my destiny. And this leads to the creation of the Deck of Many Things, which is cool.
It is really cool. We get next a new product from Beetle and Grimm's and Keith Ammon, friend and backer of the show. They are releasing 5e Encounter Cards. So Beetle and Grimm will release 4 sets of Encounter Cards on November 15th. Each card has the artwork of a monster on the front and then DM details on the back. Those cards will include the tactical tips taken from Keith's Monsters. The monsters know what they're doing, as well as preferred attacks and other information. This is really cool. Really cool.
2 sets are coming out. One is CRs 0 to 6. The other is CRs 7 and higher. They're $30 each. And I think it's great. Hats off to Beetle and Grimm's for recognizing what Keith brings, what his knowledge brings to a product like this, and to incorporate that as part of it is really smart for these monster and encounter cards. There's a link here where you can see what ICV2 covers about it. And in other news, Beetle and Grimm is launching a Kickstarter on the 6th. It'll be out by the time you hear this, for Rings of Chaos, a competitive card and board game, which I thought was interesting because you see Beetle and Grimm sort of diversifying and trying different things, including their own game, right? So we'll see.
Mhm. We'll definitely keep an eye on that. And that leads us seamlessly into creator and crowdfunding news. The first of which is a new DM's Guild supplement from Wizards of the Coast called Chains of Asmodeus. So who did this? Well, James Olin did. James is known for being the lead designer on video games like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Dragon Age Origins, and others. So he, has that background as well as a background in D&D. And it said he was recruited to BioWare based on his D&D skills. So when Archetype Entertainment formed as a video game production company as part of Wizards of the Coast, James joined that team and released Heroes of Baldur's Gate as an adventure on the DM's Guild, followed by Minx Gamboo's Journal of Villainy. And of course, they sold very well, but they sold as a Wizards of the Coast product because I believe at Wizards, there's this thing that you can't make money off of the DM's Guild
Right.
while you're a full-time employee of the company. So we got those two, and now we get Chains of Asmodeus, which is the #1 bestseller on the DM's Guild, not surprisingly. And why is it such a great hit, Teos?
I mean, like the previous books, you kind of have to wonder, how did this even happen? It's entirely possible the answer is that James Olin is just prolific. Like, this almost feels like a home campaign. Like, he ran Baldur's Gate Descended to Avernus and then fleshed out the entire experience and then just decided to write it up. But also because maybe being in the video game industry, he's connected to artists in some way, because there is an unbelievable amount of art in this product. And a lot of it is computer generated, like it looks like it's sort of out of a video game. And then some of it is kind of typical art like you'd find in a book. But there is a ton of it, and you just kind of wonder, like, no independent creator could just afford doing this. So I'm very curious. I mean, proceeds go to Extra Life, so I don't know how much it has to make before it reaches that point, but it is 286 pages focused on the nine hells. And if you're one of those folks out there going like, I wish Wizards of the Coast would have given me a source book on the nine hells, well, this is the best you're going to get out of it, other than going to 3rd edition source books where they did that already. You get more than 50 high CR monsters. If stat blocks for Asmodeus, Lord of the Nine, all major archdevils. You have 20 plus infernal magic items, a corruption mechanic. Every layer of the nine hells is detailed with illustrated maps. Now, the maps may be a little basic because of how the hells work, but still you get maps for them. And each of these layers has really decent levels of detail, right? Because the adventure takes you there. And so you get to see what you should do in each of these places. And you have, I'd say a session or two worth of content for each layer, at least. The adventure spans levels 11 to 20, and it's all for $30. So yeah, I was impressed. There's some neat details, like the beginning. You choose a soul that your character is here to save, which could also be your own. You also, as a group, choose a group patron, such as the Hellriders of Elturel, and then this kind of colors things later as you go through it. The corruption mechanic is because there are often hard choices or opportunities for you to go wrong, including not of your own volition. There's a fair bit of like, there is a powerful demon that radiates an aura of making you want to do excessive revelry or things like that. Material's clean. It doesn't go into details when things like that happen, but it's the hells. And there's some big, bold things here, Shawn. I did buy it. I did look because I was curious. So I spent, backup money that I had to look at it. And there's giant flying warships, swarms of giant insects chasing you into a hag's hut with a giant disembodied hag arm outside, an eye market run by a beholder, and mind flare where they replace your eyes with magic items. All sorts of wild stuff like that. So it's big and bold, and I think a lot of people will like it. I will say that if this were a Wizards project, Wizards would probably want to do work to it, right? To sand down edges, create fine tune the experience. But for a guild product, it's excellent. It's really good.
There you go. It's big and bold and available for you right now on the DM's Guild. Also available to you right now for free is a new blog series from our friend and the super talented Greg Marks on Planar Adventures. He's doing this for Kobold Press's blog, and it is perfect if you are in the Planescape mood or a similar themed campaign. What do these blogs cover? Well, the first one covers creating adventures, ideas on themes, locations, NPCs, and more. Contains an example of rolling on tables to create your adventure. Blog 2 is Magic of the Planes, several spells reflecting or working off of the planes. You can even summon a mechanical skull knowledgeable in planar lore. The third blog is 2 new subclasses, the Barbarian Path of the Great Test and the Cleric Philosophist. So if you are into the planes right now for whatever reason, you can get Greg's wonderful expertise at your fingertips in this blog from Kobold Press. Morris at EN World has ranked the top crowdfunders for tabletop role-playing games. Teos, you covered this. What do you got for us?
Yeah, previously Morris has said, "Hey, here are the number like the top campaigns, right? So individual Kickstarter that raised a lot of money, and often he looks at sort of the $1 million club of campaigns that have run more than one. But this was a question of looking at, well, if you add up everything a creator or company has released, how many go above 2 million? And the answer is there are 22 that have more than 2 million in combined sales. And he ranked them. So the top goes to Monte Cook Games, which I think a lot of us, if we had to guess, you might pick Monte Cook to be in the top 2. They just relaunched their Invisible Sun RPG. I have a copy. It's cool. It's awesome. And they have 22 Kickstarters, 4 backer kit campaigns, totaling 13.2 million. Good on them. Free League is not far behind that, with I think even more releases, but a slightly lower number. Then you have Magpie Games, and some of these companies like Magpie, they've had like a particularly successful Kickstarter, and others have had many small ones. So you can see a diversity in there as you look at that. Hit Point Press, Richard Thomas of Onyx Path Publishing, Kobold Press, Matt Colville, Exalted Funeral, Shane Hensley with Pinnacle Entertainment Group and Savage Worlds, Goodman Games, and then Ghostfire Gaming. So, and then another 11 or so after that. It's a neat list to look at and contemplate for what this means to the industry, because Kickstarter didn't exist not that long ago, and this is just what a difference this makes. And to think of a number of companies that are obviously, you don't keep all this money, but you are moving it through the system and bolstering the economy of the hobby and helping creators rise with it, and a lot of good work being done through this.
Yeah, 2 thoughts. The one is I wouldn't, be in the position I'm in if Kickstarter wasn't there to fund these things. So, that, like you said, Teos, that's a huge deal. The second is, Ghostfire is on the list, and it's funny because we are on the list 3 times. We are on the list for our own things. We are on the list for the partnerships that we have with the Dungeon Dudes and with Eldermancy. So if you add up those 3 for us, it puts us in like the top 5.
Wow.
So yeah, and like I said, it's great. It's as much as we can have problems with some of these large companies that have been controversial over the years, Kickstarter being one of them. It has created a lot of opportunities for for creators to connect with fans and a market and an audience. That's super important. So
Yeah, and another part is that these companies are all fairly different. Like if you look at any one of these
mhm.
companies, they're not all like the same, right? So like Monty Cook has a pretty small team. They pay each other well. They take care of each other with benefits and things like that, but very small. Very they don't do a lot of freelancing or anything like that. And they are very different than how MCDM is. And very different than how Ghostfire is, and
Mhm.
and then you have some that are just like almost like an individual, and it can vary so much between these on the list. And so there are a lot of uh, things here. And of course, as a creator, I ponder, how did these folks even get here? And I don't think a lot of them would even know how. Like it really is interesting how
No.
things can happen and lead to success. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about business, the business side of things all the time, on the air, off the air, and not just the RPG business, but business in general, about these great successes we see or the great failures that
Mhm.
unfortunately happen, and there's really no rhyme nor reason to any of it. The downfalls are just as accidental as the successes, and just when you think you know what caused a success, uh, the industry gets turned around and you find out you knew nothing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing and it's terrifying and it's chaotic, but it's where we are in our world. There you go. Hey, speaking of chaotic things in our world, Forge of Foes, from a quite interesting team of one Teos Abadia, Scott Gray, and Mike Shea. That rhymes, those last two. It's available in PDF right now, and you can get it in print soon. If you're a backer, you should either have your copy or it should be on its way. I know mine is on its way. If you missed it, you can order online at shop.slyflourish.com. Some parts are placed in the Creative Commons. You can read about that at slyflourish.com. And if you want a quick stat block generator using the rules in the book, guess where that's available? Also at slyflourish.com. Good work, Teos.
What? Sorry, I just got distracted because this book is so good. I were you talking?
It's you book is so good you were flipping through it rather than listening to your
No,
podcast
I
partner.
am so proud of this thing. It is so unbelievable to hold it in my hands, and I'm very proud of the work we did as a team. And I'm still proud of the work we did as a team because it shifts. I now do very little, and I get to learn from Mike Shea as he handles all of the printing and distribution challenges and everything else. And I could fill a show with all the things that happen as part of a Kickstarter that includes distribution. And I don't know that I recommend it for people who aren't Mike Shea. It's
This is true.
complicated.
It is complicated. It is stressful. It is not for the faint of heart. And you, all three of you, in your own ways, did a great job to bring
Uh,
this to us. And I've been told my book is in the mail, so I'm waiting for it
Awesome. Well,
with
is
bated
hearing from
breath.
people getting it is the best. That is so good. So, thank you, everyone.